if we take the lens of a scientific view, and that's from the start, I said I'm looking at scientific and indigenous ways of knowing, I'm going to spend the next probably 20 minutes talking a bit about the scientific view of ideas. And so that what you've got here, concept creation is certainly the centre of science. And you know, over the last couple weeks that you've been focusing on gravity as a concept, looking at energy as another concept, and also looking at a whole range of other things associated with those key concepts. We could say science continually generates new concepts by interpretive effort, and we merely start to use them. And so that, for instance, the concept global warming. So the concept global warming was probably never existed prior to about the last 10, 15 years, because we didn't really have a sense of what global warming is. Okay? It always existed, but it's never been a focus in terms of what's happening. We've had ice age and so forth, but as humans, we're trying to sort of interpret our world and to look at, okay, well, what impact are we making, the human race is making on the world as we live in it at the moment. The other thing, somewhat I could all nouns refer to concepts or identities. So, and we talked about this last lecture when I talked about doing a concept map, and I said that the key concepts as we go from one concept to another, they are the nouns that we may link one idea to another, and associated with those links, probably a verb or something to try to make a connection between those concepts. So that's sort of in terms of, so concept creation is an important part of looking at science education. The other thing is that, and why I talked about concept mapping last week, and I would really emphasise this, that when you look at your second assignment, also your first assignment, in terms of when you give your presentation in a couple of weeks' time, what does it mean? You obviously will be building something, but you want to be able to identify the key concepts associated with that artefact that you're going to build. The artefact is there as a tool, just a vehicle, just to express your understanding of those ideas. And so as teachers, we need to really tackle your own understanding. So why I started with those video clips is getting you to think a bit about what does it all mean. Science does play a big part, even though we may not totally understand science as we live it. But certainly, there are other lenses that we want to place across that. And I'll move into indigenous ways of knowing later in this lecture. Teachers need to be able to make the concepts explicit in ways that are understood by students at particular stages in their cognitive development. So what I would do with kindergarten kids and year 1 kids would be quite different to what I would do with year 3, 4, or 5, 6, and then 9, 10, year 9 and 10 students. So being able to see how concepts build is really important for your own understanding, so that you can then be able to become masterful in your teaching of those concepts in the classroom. So concept explanations that rely on abstract ideas will be poorly understood by students whose cognitive development is still grounded in concrete operations. But I think there's nothing better than actually, and I go back to the experience, trying to get the brain working with the heart that it's doing is so extremely important. So building with concrete things makes it really relevant to the kids. They can actually got something to hang on to. And also for your own self. I think you found if you started to reflect on your own learning over the last few weeks, and I know many of you have said to me, and probably to the other tutors, that science wasn't your subject prior to coming here. But I think if you start to play with those concepts, you start to build your own confidence in that, then you're going to better understand what's going on and be able to then link it to other key concepts in your teaching. Now, how concepts are created will influence how you construct learning experiences. So that when you go back to your second assignment in particular, where you actually have to develop 5 separate experiences. Okay, so you really need to be able to see how each experience will build on the previous experience. And so I would advise that as you start to do that, generate your own grow as you move from one experience to the next. If you do not have an understanding of how concepts are created, you will not understand how to construct effective learning and teaching experiences. So if you do not understand how concepts are created by people, you will not understand your role as a teacher in the learning process. And certainly if you start to relate this to other disciplines like English, teaching kids how to read, then in terms of you've gone through with your lecturers other units that you've done in terms of understanding how you might be able to look at vowels, in terms of how they work together to make sounds, how they then put together to make words, and so on. So it's building that up in the same way as you did from the very beginning in your first tube, in terms of your understanding of electricity and how it then built your understanding from the hands-on activities that we gave you to really develop your understanding of it. Okay, let's start something simple like a table. Okay, this is a table. If we were to describe the table, we know from our own experiences not all tables look like this. Okay? So what are the things that actually make us say that's a table? What things would you highlight, describe to me what a table is? A flat surface. What else? It's got legs, some way of support. Okay. So we've got how many legs does it have? Sorry? May have 4. If it had 3, it may even have 1. Or none. Then it could be that it's just on a it could be on a wall. On some form of support. Okay, so then go back to then what is our concept of table? Okay, so sort of that. So in kind of something like this for the first time, we need to be able to sort of, again, when we're starting to find out key concepts, say in science, we need to know what concepts kids have in kindergarten or prior to coming to kindergarten in year 1, year 2, and so on, as we start to build our field knowledge. Do that. So building our field knowledge is what's really crucial. So it is a matter of language. So we try to define our understanding of the world that we live in. So if we start to look more closely at this table, so we look for commonality. So that you've got 2 tables there. They're different size. We also got another table at the front here. Okay, and I think we've come to the conclusion yet. All 3 have got a flat surface, okay? And all 3 have got some sort of support. In this particular case, different. Those 2 have got 4 legs, but that's, as I said, not all tables need to have 4 legs. Okay? So, in terms of the child is making connections in terms of what experiences they have there. So that's what that diagram's trying to signify. And so concepts are formed by isolating specific attributes of 2 or more similar concretes. So in terms of building there, now if you have a close look at, there are other sorts of tables. You've got this one here, you've got almost like a 3-leg system supporting that particular table. This one, again, quite different. And then the one at the top, in fact, has got 3 legs. So it needs, if something constitutes tableness, it needs some sort of support and it has a flat surface where items can be placed on it. So we're starting to define what we mean by a table, our concept. The larger the number of entities, the stronger the concept. So other attributes of tables that might be conjured up in the mind of an individual, things like height, weight, colour, number of supports, diameter of surface, etc., are omitted from the concept itself. They just describe it, but they may vary from one example of a table to another. Once a concept is formed, it is defined by identifying its essential characteristics. And so we did that earlier by saying that it needs some support and it has a flat surface. So that's defining what our understanding of a table is. So, but what makes a table? So here there are different examples. So when we start to look at concepts, and concepts can be fairly abstract. And again, if you could take a particular lens, whether it's a social justice lens or it's a looking at life, what is life lens, or whatever you may look from that perspective, that's certainly going to impact on your understanding of that concept. So concept is abstract idea, notion or identity that serves to designate a category or class of identities, events or phenomena or relations between them. So when I asked you at the very beginning to identify what were some of the key terms that were shown in that video, in the two video clips, then you drew on your own knowledge from your own experiences and you came up with those. There are lots more as you start to sort of put yourself and watch that video clip again and again. Once a concept is formed, it's given a specific definition and assigned a word to represent it. And so that's what we do in the classroom, is we try to build that field knowledge with our students. And so what happens is that there's a series of events or series of observations that help build that concept. Okay, so what happens is that when one thing is observed, it cannot be a concept. It exists as an identity without relationship or properties or in common with anything else. When two or more identities, events, phenomena are formed, then we're able to then test that. So the more we see things in different places, we can then help to construct that. So if we go back to the task that you'll have to do in the second assignment, you'll find that in your first experience as opposed to your second experience, you need to be clear on what ideas, how new ideas are being introduced to really build on that understanding. Follow what I'm saying? That's clear? So that you've got 5 experiences that you need to focus on, but you need to be able to, with each one, identify what are the concepts in that first one. You might at the very beginning present an overview, as I may have done with the YouTube clip, but then we got to break that down into segments. As you found, it's too difficult to deal with all those concepts at once. Okay, so the skill of an effective teacher is being able to identify what are the components and how can we actually introduce those in our lesson design. So we start to look at our, I could have had 5 circles there. There'd be our 5 experiences that will build on the concepts that you may be focusing on in your second assignment. Now, a concept formation, individual event, phenomenal thing, object. The concept is the container. Our concept, like table, we can go around from house to house, shop to shop, and we know which are tables and which are not tables. Okay, so in some respects, it makes more sense if we start to look, I think it's the next one. Say, for instance, if we look at the concept bird. Do all birds fly? No. So what's common in every bird? Huh? Beak. Sorry. They have a beak. Yeah? Yeah. What else do they have? Feathers. So the covering. Feathers. Yep. Anything else? Yes. Sorry? They lay eggs. Yes? Any birds don't lay an egg? I think they all lay eggs. Yep. Yep. And I think you'll see from up there, they're warm-blooded, egg-laying vertebrate. What's a vertebrate? It has a spine, it has a backbone. Okay? It has a skeleton, if you like. And we know that, if you go back to your high school days, you'll probably find there are 5 different classes of vertebrates. Know what they are? Yeah, going back to deep memory here, Okay, we've got fish, amphibian, bird, reptile, and mammal. Okay? And they all have backbone or skeleton. Okay? Not all of them are warm-blooded. Okay? Birds and mammals are warm-blooded. Okay? Cold-blooded. We'll come back to that later. Okay, so warm-blooded feathered animals from the chordate phylum. Okay, there's a bit of scientific jargon here. So that's the fish category. Oh, sorry, not the fish category. It's part of the chordate. So it would be the fish would be separate from that. They, in fact, they do branch. And if you know anything about evolution, there is a place where they start to branch. To do with it going from cold-blooded, warm-blooded. Have hollow bones which make them light enough so birds build nests and lay eggs. Any of a class of vertebrates that regulate their body temperature internally, have bodies that are covered almost entirely with feathers, and have forelimbs modified as wings that enable most to fly. So there are just some definitions of bird. So we know, we've talked about this, so what does the bird container contain? Okay, so we talked about it being feathers. It has a beak. And in this particular case, if you have a look at its feet, this particular bird can actually swim well because of the webbed feet. Not all birds have webbed feet. Okay, so you've got different examples there. Okay. So we talked about the concept bird. And I think earlier in the lecture I talked about global warming, so that we start to look at other concepts. Fossil fuels. Do we know what a fossil fuel is? Then we give you a definition of a fossil fuel. Sorry? You burn it? Okay, yes. Well, all fuels will burn. Yep. Sorry? Yes, okay, yes. So what do we mean by fossil? What does that come from? What does that mean? Coal? Okay, yes. So in fact it's actually derived from vegetation that has been buried and decayed and it's changed to be fossilised and it's turned into coal or shale or other forms of rock that can be used as a fuel source. Okay? The fuel is something that you can burn. For instance, food is a fuel. Not fossilised. We can grow food, but again, for us as machines, humans or as any animal, we need food to get the energy for it to go, to move, do the things that it needs to do. Other things associated with global warming relates to weather. It's quite different. So when we burn fuel, it impacts onto our weather. Okay? Causes pollution, and so that in fact impacts on the weather, and also impacts on climate change. Now, we could argue for climate change or not, depending upon which quarter you stand in terms of your argument. But certainly, the climate can change by what we do to our environment. There's enough evidence for me to stand here and say, yes, we can have an impact on our environment. Now, whether it's going to be lead to the problems that scientists have said, the jury's still out. Okay, so that concept of global warming is quite different to the concept bird or fish. But it is a concept, and again, it has a number of other connotations associated with it in terms of its meaning. Okay, so concepts building can be linked with other concepts to form new concepts. This process is critical in science and in science education. I would argue it's also critical in terms of education if we start to put in other perspectives, from a cultural perspective or from a historical perspective. Okay, So in terms of, we just a bit more close to that. Okay, all too frequently the link between the word and the concept is so great that it's difficult to articulate the concept itself. The word weather is used to represent a concept. So when we talk about weather, we're talking about our atmosphere. We're talking about, at the moment, we describe weather as it's been raining the last couple of days. So it's wind, rain, hot, sunny, whatever. These are terms that we would use in everyday life. But in terms of the concept of weather, bringing those concepts together, connect to weather, is an abstract process. So it's just a matter of building that with your children when you teach the understanding of weather. So we can describe weather. It's measured in terms of such things as wind, temperature, humidity, atmospheric pressure, cloudiness, precipitation. In most places, weather can change from hour to hour, day to day, and season to season. The way we now look at it, my wife looks at her mobile phone every day and says, what am I going to wear today? Looking at the sort of weather conditions for the day. We all probably do. So it does impact on the way we live our life. Let's take the concept tomato sauce. Okay, so what's inside the bottle? What do we know it to be? Tomato? Well, what's in it? It's just not tomato by itself, is it? Sugar, salt, water, preservatives, yes, all those things. And it tastes good for some people. I get quite upset with my children because they put barbecue sauce on everything. You spend hours cooking a wonderful meal and then they destroy by putting barbecue sauce on it. But I won't go there because I might offend some people. But anyway. All right, so it's a blend of concepts, something different. How do we find out? So, I mean, we can certainly, take tomato sauce and break it down and find out what's in it. It's a mixture. Okay, so the term weather or tomato sauce is so frequently used that it's difficult to most people to define or to articulate what it is. We implicitly know what weather means, but what is problematic with such implicit conceptual knowledge is that it's frequently difficult to make it explicit. We need to help children make their conceptual understandings explicit. That's the hard bit. That's your job. So really playing with these ideas is something that you'll need to do. We also need to make sure that we can make our own conceptual understanding explicit. So we often match and we can share by talking to each other about a concept. Taking concepts for granted or assuming that they are understood easily done but poses serious problems for teachers. In order to understand concepts and their role in cognitive development and science education, it's essential to be able to define the concepts being used even if it means using a dictionary. This is even more so when the word itself may have one meaning when used in the context of a scientific investigation and another in general and everyday use. So we often have that, and that becomes a problem for us in being able to identify those differences. So it does go back to language, very much so, and being able to define the words that we use when we describe something. Look at this one, no pedestrians, animals, horse-drawn vehicles beyond this point. Just on the motorway, just not too far from here. Okay, so, what's our concept of animals? And, we often, kids don't think, humans, we're not animals. We are, but sometimes that's a hard concept to get across to kids.